June Lockhart's passing at the age of 100 marks the end of a chapter in Hollywood history that can never be repeated. She wasn't just a familiar face from television. She was a bridge between the black and white innocence of early cinema and the bright, chaotic world of modern entertainment. Her presence on screen carried warmth, grace, and a quiet intelligence that made audiences feel like they knew her personally. To generations of viewers, she wasn't simply an actress, she was family. And now, as news of her death spreads across the world, it feels as if millions have lost someone they grew up with, someone who quietly taught them about love, courage, and compassion through the characters she brought to life. Her family, friends, and fans are in deep mourning. Those closest to her have described the atmosphere in her home as one filled with both tears and gratitude. Gratitude for the long, full life she lived, and tears for the inevitable goodbye that even a century couldn't delay. Born on June 25, 1925 in New York City, June was practically destined for the stage. Her parents, June Lockhart and Kathleen Lockhart, were both accomplished actors, and her childhood revolved around rehearsal halls, theaters, and movie sets. Acting wasn't just a career she stumbled into, it was her birthright. She often said that her earliest memories were of watching her parents perform and feeling an unexplainable pull toward the lights. It wasn't ambition in the traditional sense, it was more like belonging. She understood even as a child that storytelling was in her blood. When she made her film debut in A Christmas Carol in 1938, she was just 12 years old, appearing alongside her own mother and father. It was a poetic beginning, a family of actors portraying a story about redemption, love, and the human spirit. That first performance wasn't flashy, but it had something that defined her entire career: honesty. Even then, there was a sincerity in her eyes that made people believe in what she was saying. As she grew older, June became a familiar figure on stage and in early Hollywood films. She appeared in productions that reflected a changing world, as America moved from the Depression era into wartime. During the 1940s, she gained attention for her ability to balance subtle emotion with strength, qualities that later became her signature. She wasn't a performer who relied on glamour or scandal. She built her reputation through consistency and professionalism, something her co-stars frequently mentioned. Directors loved working with her because she understood the rhythm of a scene. She could say more with a look than many could with a page of dialogue. By the time television began to dominate American households in the 1950s, June was perfectly positioned for the new era of storytelling. She had the presence of a classic film actress, but the warmth and accessibility that television demanded. Then came the role that changed her life: Ruth Martin on Lassie. From 1958 to 1964, she played the gentle, wise, and endlessly patient mother who held her family together, and who, in many ways, became the moral heart of the show. Every week, families gathered around their televisions to watch the adventures of a loyal collie and the humans who loved her. Yet beneath the simple storylines was something deeper: the comfort of seeing a stable home, a loving mother, and a sense of decency that felt timeless. June's portrayal wasn't sentimental or exaggerated. She played Ruth as a real woman, caring, firm, and capable. Viewers, especially children, found something reassuring in her voice. Even decades later, people who met her at conventions or interviews would tell her, "You were my mom when I was growing up." She always smiled at that. She knew that she had become a symbol of love and stability for a generation of kids who sometimes didn't have that in real life. But June was never content to stay in one lane. After Lassie, she took a bold leap into something entirely different: science fiction. In 1965, she was cast as Maureen Robinson in Lost in Space, the mother of a family of space explorers marooned on a distant planet. The role could easily have been campy or shallow, but June brought the same grounded humanity to Maureen that she had given Ruth Martin. She became the emotional anchor of the series, calm in crisis, rational amid chaos, and nurturing even when surrounded by robots and alien landscapes. It was a strange transition for television audiences at the time, from a farm with a collie to a spaceship drifting through the cosmos. But it worked. Children admired the adventure. Adults admired the quiet heroism of a mother who could face the unknown without losing her composure. In a way, she represented something profound, the idea that love and family could survive anywhere, even in space. The show became a cult classic, and June's image in her silver spacesuit became iconic. To this day, fans remember her steady voice saying, "Oh, John," whenever her husband's scientific experiments went a bit too far. Off-screen, June Lockhart was much more than the characters she played. Those who knew her personally describe a woman of sharp intellect and endless curiosity. She read constantly, newspapers, novels, political essays, and loved to debate ideas. She cared about social issues, about the environment, about the state of the arts. Friends recall her sense of humor, dry, understated, sometimes wickedly funny. She loved music and was known to sit at the piano during quiet evenings playing old standards. She raised 2 daughters, Anne Lockhart and Elizabeth Lockhart, both of whom followed in her footsteps as performers. To her family, she wasn't just an actress, she was a mother who made every birthday, every holiday, every success or disappointment meaningful. She didn't live with the arrogance of fame. In fact, she often said she was grateful to have been part of shows that brought people comfort rather than controversy. When interviewers asked her how she felt about being typecast as the perfect mom, she would laugh softly and say, "If you're going to be typecast, that's a pretty good way to be remembered." In her later years, June continued to make guest appearances on television, often playing elderly women with wisdom and wit. She appeared on shows like Grey's Anatomy, Cold Case, and Seventh Heaven, proving that even in her 70s and 80s, she still had that same spark. She attended conventions where fans of Lost in Space would line up to meet her, some even bringing their children to introduce them to the woman who had shaped their own childhoods. She always greeted them with warmth, signing autographs slowly so she could look each person in the eye. She believed that fans deserved genuine attention. After all, they were the ones who had kept her work alive for generations. When asked about retirement, she once said she didn't believe in the concept. "You retire from a job," she explained, "but acting isn't a job, it's part of who I am."
When she turned 90, tributes poured in from all over Hollywood. Former co-stars spoke about her professionalism and grace. Bill Mumy, who played her son Will Robinson in Lost in Space, described her as a second mother, and said that her presence on set made everyone calmer. She was known for small gestures of kindness, remembering birthdays, bringing homemade cookies, offering advice without judgment. Even in an industry that can be notoriously self-centered, June managed to remain generous. She gave her time to causes like animal welfare and arts education, quietly donating and volunteering without seeking publicity. She once said that success meant being useful, and by that measure she remained successful until the very end. As she entered her centennial year, June lived quietly in Santa Monica, surrounded by family photographs, books, and mementos from her long career. She often welcomed old friends for tea, reminiscing about Hollywood's golden days, the actors who had come and gone, the moments of magic that still made her smile. Her home was filled with laughter even in her later years, though her health had started to decline. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep, her family was by her side. They later shared that her final moments were serene, that she had been listening to music and speaking softly to loved ones. There was no struggle, no fear, just the gentle fading of a woman who had lived fully and left nothing unsaid. The news of her death sent waves of emotion through social media. Younger generations discovered her legacy through clips and tributes, while older fans felt as though part of their childhood had been taken away. Messages poured in from actors and directors who had worked with her or grown up watching her. "She was grace personified," one message read. Another said, "June Lockhart was the mother we all wished we had." Even NASA paid tribute, acknowledging her role as Maureen Robinson and the inspiration she had given to women in science and space exploration. Her image had long been a symbol of curiosity and courage, qualities that transcend fiction. For her family, those public tributes were comforting but bittersweet. Behind the applause and headlines was their personal grief, the quiet ache of missing her laughter, her advice, her warmth. Her daughters described sitting in her living room after the funeral, surrounded by the scent of her favorite flowers, talking about her stories. There were tears, but there was also laughter, because June had always taught them to celebrate life, not to dwell on loss. The service was held in a quiet chapel near her home in Santa Monica, surrounded by tall oak trees that swayed softly in the autumn breeze. The sunlight filtered through the stained glass, casting warm colors across the pews, as if nature itself was paying its respects. Every detail of the ceremony felt personal, a reflection of who June Lockhart truly was: graceful, gentle, and deeply human. The casket was adorned with her favorite flowers, white lilies and pale pink roses, arranged simply but beautifully, just the way she would have wanted. There were no flashing cameras, no media intrusion, only the soft hum of shared memories filling the air. Her daughters, Anne and Elizabeth, sat close together in the front row, holding hands tightly as a few tears slid down their cheeks. They whispered to each other between the moments of silence, as though continuing the conversations they had always shared with their mother. When the music began, a piano melody that June herself had often played on quiet evenings, many in the room closed their eyes. Those notes carried them back through time, to moments on set, to laughter between takes, to the warmth of her home where she would hum softly while making tea. Several old friends from the entertainment industry were present, some in their 80s and 90s, faces etched with both age and emotion. They remembered her not just as a star, but as someone who always had time to listen, who made everyone around her feel valued. A few spoke briefly, sharing gentle anecdotes, how she would bring homemade cookies to rehearsals, how she never forgot a birthday, how she would stay late after filming just to thank the crew personally. At one point, her granddaughter stood and walked slowly to the front. Her voice quivered as she began to speak, but she never lost her composure. She talked about how her grandmother loved morning walks by the ocean, how she would stop to feed the birds and talk about gratitude, how she taught them to find beauty in small things. "She wasn't just my grandmother," she said softly. "She was my compass. She showed me how to live kindly, how to love deeply, and how to stay curious about the world." The words brought quiet sobs from the audience. As the service drew to a close, everyone stood for a moment of silence. It wasn't empty or cold. It was peaceful, the kind of silence that feels full of love. When they stepped outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and lavender. A final curtain call for a woman whose life had been nothing short of luminous. Even now, in the wake of her passing, it's hard not to feel her presence. Watch an old episode of Lassie or Lost in Space, and her essence is still there. Calm, wise, endlessly kind. It's rare for an actor's work to age so gracefully, but June's performances do. They're timeless because they're rooted in truth. She wasn't pretending to be a good mother. She was channeling the real care she had for people. That authenticity can't be faked, and it's why her legacy feels eternal. Her century on. This earth was filled with transformation, in the world, in her industry, in herself. Yet, through it all, she never lost her humanity. She never became cynical, never turned her back on her craft. Instead, she kept learning, kept watching, kept marveling at life. Her death at 100 isn't just the passing of an individual. It's the closing of a bridge to a gentler time in Hollywood, a time when storytelling was about empathy and wonder. She stood for something rare, decency in a world that often rewards the opposite. The tears shed by her family and fans are more than grief. They're gratitude. Gratitude for every episode, every smile, every moment she made people believe in something good. For those who loved her, the world feels quieter now, But her voice, that steady and reassuring tone that once guided families through their television screens, will never truly fade. Somewhere, in the echoes of old broadcasts and cherished memories, June Lockhart still speaks, reminding us that love, courage, and kindness are never lost, not even in space.